So here we are out in the woods collecting ramps, also known as wild leeks. So while they're called wild leeks, they're not related to leeks. They're related to onions, which are also related to garlic, shallots, and chives. So right now I'm in the middle of what we call a ramp or a wild leek stand. And we were able to find this by first going to the right kind of environment. So we went to find a place that was going to be filled with moist, neutral soil. And we were looking for a stand of trees that would include sugar maples, beech, elm, those kind of trees, and that's what we were able to find. As you can see in the background, we've got a good source of water, which has helped to keep this area nice and moist. So when we spotted these, we knew these were ramps because of their light green color and the time of year. So right now this is mid-May, which is early spring for us this year. And when you come across these leaves, what you'll find is that they usually grow in pairs of 2 leaves that are long, about 8 to 12 inches long. They're totally smooth, there's no hair. There's a little bit of a rubbery feel to the leaf. The margins are also smooth, so the edges are smooth all the way around. There's not what's called a mid-vein that's very defined in the middle. These are something that you can also ID by breaking off a leaf and smelling it. And if it smells like a mix between onion and garlic, that's also a very good sign. So the edible part of the ramp or the wild leek, which again can be used interchangeably, is everything but the roots down here. So you'll want to cut off these roots, and you can eat the bulb, you can eat the stem, and you can eat the leaves. Later on in the spring, they're going to create a stalk, and then on top of that stalk there will be a flower. That stalk and flower are not something that should be eaten. And at that point in time, a lot of the energy from the plant is going to be going into creating that stalk and flower. So that's not a good time to collect ramps or wild leeks. At that time, after the flower blooms, the leaves will start to die away, they'll wilt. And after the flower finishes blooming, eventually that stalk will die off too. However, the bulbs will remain underneath the ground, so the bulbs are this portion, and they'll remain under the ground and they will still be edible. So you can collect ramps throughout the summer, as long as you remember where the ramps were earlier in the spring. Ramps grow all the way from Canada through the Midwest and down to the southeast. Again, they're known as leeks in maybe the northern part, and then towards the Appalachia area they're known as ramps. When you go out to harvest wild leeks, you're going to look for large stands like this and try to harvest no more than 1/3 of the patch, as they take quite a while to generate. So there's a smaller patch behind me, so you'd want to leave that patch alone so that it can be so that it can grow through the year and be there for next year and grow bigger, and come to this bigger section and again not harvest more than 1/3. As you can see, this is an extremely large patch, and there's no way we would harvest even 1/3. The ideal rule in harvesting is harvesting only what you need, and in this extremely large patch we would never need a full 1/3 of that patch. So when we talk about harvesting, let's talk about how to do it. You can go to a ramp stand and just collect the leaves if that's what you're interested in, which can be used in soups and stews. But a lot of times the most flavor is going to be in the bulb and the stem part, so you might as well just harvest the whole thing. So bring along a hand trowel or a small shovel, and you'll place the shovel beside the ramps, maybe about 1 inch away, because the bulbs are going to grow a little bit bigger than that stem. Sometimes they're a full inch bigger than that stem. And you're going to dig down. These bulbs typically are about 3 inches underneath the ground, sometimes a little deeper, sometimes a little more shallow. You're going to stick your shovel into the earth beside it and move the shovel back to create some room for the ramp to move around. And then you're going to follow the stalk of the ramp down until you feel the bulb, and then you can put your fingers around the bulb and pull up that way. They're not necessarily the best plant to just come and kind of tug. They are delicate in that fashion, and so they will break before you get to the bulb that way. So let's dig up a few so you can see what they look like. Another thing about identifying ramps is a lot of times the stem part will be a purple or reddish color. Also they'll be white or green. So just because you find one that is white or green doesn't mean that, that you've not found a ramp. So here we go. This is what they look like. This one came out a whole lot cleaner than I expected, and this one came out as you would normally expect, pretty dirty. There's this bit of kind of sheath-like paper around the edge of a ramp that you can kind of just take your fingers and squeeze the top of the stem and just run your fingers down. And as you can see, this outer sheath will kind of come with me and remove a good bit of that dirt. A good idea when you're harvesting is just try to leave as much dirt as you can in the spot that you were harvesting. There's a lot of things that we can't see with our naked eye in the sand and dirt that you want to just leave where you found it. Also, you don't want to bring that home. The more you clean it here, the less you have to clean it at home. So that's a good way to do it. And then before the end of the day, we'll take our ramps over to the stream and run them in the water real quick to, again, just get rid of what dirt that we can here. So that's how you collect ramps. These are used in our recipes quite a bit as an onion or garlic replacement or additive. Again, you can eat the whole thing except for the rootlet. And they're easy to identify with the leaves looking a lot like the shape of a rabbit ear. There's again going to be 2 or 3. They'll be smooth, light in color. In the spring, again, they're one of the first few greens that come up. So they're really easy to identify, and this is a really great time to come and harvest the whole plant as it's easy to get to, easy to identify. So happy harvesting. So here we collected the ramps that we're going to use for our recipe today. Got a handful and I'm here to wash them off. I've already taken off some of that papery sheath that we talked about. I'm just going to rinse them and move them around in the water. And I'm also going to do my best to just go ahead and pop off those little root pieces here in the water, again, so I don't have to take it home. And that gets rid of a lot of my dirt right here. So I'll spend a little bit more time later taking off the rest of the roots, but as you can see, I've taken off the root of this one here, and here it is in my hand. So a lot of that inedible part and dirty part is going to stay here and won't go home with me. But as I've been down here, this is also a great time to collect fiddlehead fern or ostrich fern, and it's all around this area. I'm going to walk. So what we have over here is an ostrich fern stand, and this is a really great place to find it. We're here on the edge of a creek or a river, and this area has been flooded out, so there's not a lot of competition here. And we see these brown fronds from the earlier year, from last year. So that's a really good indicator that we're going to come across some ostrich fern. And here, if you look for ostrich fern, another good way to tell, sometimes these break off over the winter time, is there's this kind of hard body here from the old fern that was here last year. And so if you look for the fiddlehead fern, for the ostrich fern specifically, you're going to look for one that has this gold papery sheath. It's not a hair. It really does look and feel a lot like a really thin tissue paper, and it really does have a bit of a sheen to it like gold. So it's this gold papery sheath, and these, as they're small, really small, they're a darker green, and as they get a little taller, they just lighten up just the tiniest bit. But they actually do look like a fiddlehead or the back of a violin. So you can see here he's got this scrolled portion right here, and it's really tightly wound. And you can pick all the way down until you can't feel it anymore. The farther you pick, the little bit more sand you're going to have to wash off, and that's perfectly fine. Another thing is that put these right here, the ostrich fern is hairless. So you're not going to be seeing a lot of hairs on it. So if you see white hairs on it, it's probably not an ostrich fern. If you see red hairs or black hairs, again, it's probably not an ostrich fern. It's got this really deep groove right in the middle of it, just like celery. So that's another really good indicator that you found ostrich fern. They grow in a really tight clump all together, and as they grow, and you can probably see it in some of these taller ones, they start to kind of open up like a funnel. And so they'll start to lean back a little bit, and then they'll unfurl, and then when you look around as they've totally matured or completely matured, they're really going to look like a bunch of ostrich tail feathers. So they're a really neat plant to see through the summer, and they're usually coming up right around the same time that you're out there collecting ramps. So keep an eye out for them. These are really great in soups and stews. We have a couple recipes that include bracken fern or wavelgoggin soup, which you can also use ostrich fern fiddleheads for as well. They're really easy to blanch and freeze. They keep great in the freezer for about a year, and they taste a little bit like asparagus, maybe a little lighter in flavor, but a really great wild edible. So come on out and collect. When you're collecting, remember that you don't want to collect more than a third. There are other people and other animals that are going to want to eat these foods as well. So usually when I come across an ostrich fern patch like this, each little grouping usually has 5 heads of fiddleheads in it, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. So I'll usually collect maybe 1 or 2 from the actual clump there, and then move on to a different clump. And you can collect them when they get taller as well and they start to unfurl just a little bit. Good example. At this point, they're starting to get probably a little bit too tall, a little bit too unfurled. It's down to a matter of taste if you really want this much leafiness, but I would say that this is too far. Whereas one that is a little bit less. So this one is starting to unfurl a little bit more than the one that I pulled up earlier, and but it's still a lot taller. But this would still be a really good edible, and you can cook it whole the way it is, or you can rinse it and chop it up, but still really tasty. So happy harvesting. So we're out collecting ramps today, and we've gotten enough for our soup and vegetables tonight, and we noticed some marsh marigold, also known as cowslip, so we wanted to talk a little bit about those. And that's what we have right here to my right. We have some that is not blooming yet and some that is blooming, so you'll notice this bright yellow flower. Marsh marigold, as it sounds, or cowslips again as it's also known, grows in the marsh or near marsh water. You'll also notice maybe some other plants around that are pretty endemic of a marsh area. We've got some skunk cabbage out here as well. Marsh marigold is edible after cooking. So you'll come out and you can get it right after the snow melts. You won't see the flowers at that point, but you will see the leaves starting to come up. You'll also see these buds that are coming and growing on top of them, and the buds are edible before they bloom. And you would boil them first and pour off the water, boil them again, and on that third boil you're going to boil them for a little longer, about 30 minutes. When you boil them, they do come out, they shrink quite a bit, and they're a little bit gelatinous, kind of reminds you of green pudding, but other than that, pretty tasty. You can still collect after the flowers have bloomed a little bit. You can grab the leaves that are closer to the top, but after a while this flower is going to turn into a fruit, and at that point you're going to stop collecting. So these are really early green. They're really quick to appear right after the snow melts. Something to keep your eye out for, absolutely. And they're really beautiful. They're one of the first things to bloom in the springtime. So go on out and look around, see what you can find, and happy eating.